Hi everyone, my name is Kirsten Kraus. I'm Research Advisor for Wiz Academy and Facilitator of their Research Capacity Building Workshops. Welcome to the Wiz Academy YouTube channel where we empower researchers with tools to excel in their research. In today's video, I'm going to look at generative AI and the 4 phases of writing. So stay tuned. In a previous video, I explained and introduced the 4 phases of writing. In this video, I just want to very briefly reflect on a few experiments that I've done trying to see how generative AI, specifically ChatGPT, but also a number of other tools, how those tools could be useful in assisting me in different phases of writing. So if you haven't watched the video yet on the 4 phases of writing, it might be useful to first go and watch that video, pause this one, watch that video, and then come back to this one. But I want to say a few things about the 4 phases of writing. And just by introduction, just a quick recap. We said in the previous video that 4 phases of writing basically include the generative writing phase, is where you generate ideas. The drafting phase, where you start crafting an imaginary conversation between yourself, the literature that you're reading, and the results of your data analysis. Editing is where you prepare your document and your text for presentation, for examination, and for peer review. And then the final phase, which is peer review, is basically where your examiners or your peer reviewers engage with your scientific arguments and then give you feedback, as to either approve or agree with that, with your arguments, or give suggestions as to how you should improve and strengthen your arguments. So those are the 4 phases of writing, really in a very small nutshell. But what I want to reflect about is when ChatGPT came out, I started experimenting with ChatGPT. The first experiment that I did was to see if I can actually generate a fully AI-authored mini dissertation. And I actually successfully did that. It took me about, I would say, 50 pages of prompting, and the mini dissertation turned out to be about 36 pages. I got that dissertation examined by examiner and actually got it passed. I also took that mini dissertation, I did some scanning exercises, tests with it. I tested on Turnitin and other similarity checking tools. By the way, there's a difference between plagiarism and similarity. A tool like Turnitin can flag similarity, but it doesn't mean it's plagiarism yet. It needs human interaction, human engagement to check whether it's in fact plagiarism. So I also scanned the mini dissertation through a number of AI detectors with some interesting results, and then also scanned the mini dissertation for references, to check whether the references in-text and list of references line and those sorts of things. So there's a couple of very interesting results that came from that. I also, based on the examiner feedback, did some experimentation to see whether I can use AI tools to make data theory links. And so there was a couple of experiments that I did. One was to have a transcribed interview fed into an AI tool, and to get the AI tool to identify specific themes. Then also to see whether those themes can be consistently generated, and whether the correct themes are generated, and whether the actual correct, evidence are presented to support the themes that are generated by these AI tools. And then also I did a couple of interesting experiments on using ChatGPT for proofreading or for editing, and there's a video on that as well, so if you're interested in looking at that. But I've learned quite a lot, experimenting with these tools. What I did learn is that in the generative phase of writing is, where you generate ideas. Obviously one of the more important things that you need to do in the generative phase is, topic discovery and then like a preliminary review of literature, and there's actually a video on that as well. But in that phase, what I've learned is that you actually need to put the traditional, more systematic approaches that we've developed in academia and research next to, what artificial intelligence give us. You can't say, AI tools will replace the more rigorous approaches, like, for example, a systematic lit review. So you need both of those. What I did learn is that, you cannot outsource your thinking to an AI tool, to expect an artificial intelligence tool to generate the ideas to do your thinking for you. So it's an important phase where you as a researcher need to internalize the readings and the things that you read during the topic discovery phase, during the phase of generating ideas. And so if you outsource your thinking to an AI tool, you run quite a number of risks. For example, if you're in an interview situation and you didn't internalize the reading and an interesting follow-up question evolves, you won't know how to respond to your participant. And also during data analysis, if you haven't internalized, you can't start analyzing and reflecting about what people say until, towards the end. And so you lose a lot of depth. So that's the generative phase. But when it comes to the crafting phase or the drafting phase, it's really where you need to craft an argument. So there's a couple of things we need to do when we create an argument. Principles like you need to do argument flow, paragraph flow, you need to weave a golden thread, you need to develop an imaginary conversation. As I said, it's all about claims-driven writing as opposed to author-driven writing. You need to make use of linking words and paragraphs, and also hedging techniques, to indicate whether an argument is strong or not so strong. And what I found personally with using these AI tools is that no AI tool can actually identify how the argument should look like. The strength of the argument, how linkages should look like, how those linking words should be set up. That's something that you need to do. Only towards the end, when it comes to editing, the editing phase, you can actually ask the AI tool to do some proofreading for you. So when it comes to the drafting phase of writing, it's really important that you as a researcher, as a scientist, who has internalized all the literature and the data, that it's your responsibility to develop the argument before you get an AI tool to start checking things for you. So drafting is really up to you as an author. When it comes to editing, you could do some of the editing using AI tools to do proofreading for you. Although there's some aspects that I would really say, you need to check. At the end of the day, you as an author have the responsibility to make sure that the argument is correct, that the words are correct, that the linkages are correct. So you need to set it up. But, there are some ways in which you can use AI to assist you with editing and proofreading. One way that I experienced, for example, apart from proofreading, is that I could ask ChatGPT to convert an entire paragraph, let's say from past tense to present tense, or from first person to third person writing. But as you will see from the video on proofreading using ChatGPT, you need to submit small snippets of text. In terms of the peer review, I personally not yet experimented with using AI tools for peer review, although I know some people have tried that. So I can't comment really on that, but there are some tools that one can use. The predominant tools there are tools like for checking AI, for doing AI detection for similarity, and then for checking references. But when it comes to engaging with an argument as a peer reviewer, that again, because it's an argument, you can't outsource the engagement with an argument to something else, to a tool. But if I would summarize some of my learnings, using ChatGPT for different experiments, different phases, then the 4 phases of writing, I would say the following. I would say that generative AI always needs checking of a human. You need to be the human guardrail also, because you have the responsibility to make sure that the science is good. Secondly, I found that specifically with ChatGPT, but also other AI tools, in general, AI is good with broad global ideas, but not necessarily good with specifics. Building new relations, for example, between data and claims, and it really lacks creativity. So if you want to put a new perspective on something, you can't expect AI to do that accurately for you. I found that AI could be good with making suggestions around structure. Like, for example, it could make suggestions on book chapters, how you could structure a book chapter, how you could structure an abstract, how you could structure a methodology chapter. But at the end of the day, my view is, in a good thesis, the argument should guide the structure. It should not be that the structure should guide the argument. Like, for example, if you decide you're going to start with your theory and then move to data, then it makes sense to have your theory chapter before you have your data chapter. Or if you decide that I'm going to start with data, it makes sense to first have a chapter on methodology before you actually then do a review of literature. Because in that style of argumentation, you want the literature to confirm the findings from your data analysis. In terms of writing, I found that AI tends to produce vanilla writing, and it tends to smother your own style. I prefer to have my own style, even if it's not perfect English. At least it's the correct and perfect argument in my research. AI cannot really argue, it cannot really generate new arguments, apply hedging techniques, those sorts of things. Maybe some people would have different experiences, but at least from the experiments that I've done, I wouldn't trust AI to really come up with a good, solid new argument with creativity and so forth. It tends to regurgitate what's already out there, and it hallucinates. AI tools tend to hallucinate, so sometimes you get like these weird statements. And so it always, like I said, it needs checking. It's kind of good with providing structure, but bad with the big picture sometimes. It's not so good with context. So if you come from a non-mainstream context like South Africa or Africa, a lot of the contextual issues might be missing from the training data. So one needs to check that, specifics, particularizing, those sorts of things you need to check. And so you can't trust AI for that in totality. And so you'd rather take ownership of that. As I explained in the previous video, it's fairly good with proofreading, but there are some things that you need to check. You need to put in the correct transitional words. You need to submit small snippets for proofreading. AI, when it generates text, it could be very close to plagiarism, even if a tool like Turnitin doesn't pick it up. So one needs to check that and not entirely and fully rely on that. One also needs to ask questions about copyright. If you have facts or text that comes from training data, you need to go and check copyright issues there. What I really found with ChatGPT specifically is really bad with references. So it can generate something that looks like a reference, but if you go and check that, it's most of the time it's just fake or nonsense references. There are some AI tools that can assist you with referencing, but that's a total different discussion. Still, I believe as an author, when it comes to identifying references for your research, you need to use the traditional approaches and put it next to the AI-driven approaches and make sure that the references that you feed into the argumentation are the good ones. In terms of generating things like interview questions or interview protocol, I actually found that ChatGPT can really help with that. Although it still needs checking, because you need to, for example, make sure that in the list of interview questions, that all those questions are represented by the research questions that you've offered in the beginning of your research, or that at least there's good alignment between the research questions, the literature, and the interview questions. Like you can't have like 3 interview questions addressing one theme and nothing addressing another theme from your literature. So although AI can assist you with almost like proofreading your interview questions, you still need to check whether those interview questions actually address the issues that you wanted to address. I found AI to be good with generating summaries or introductions, but again, that definitely needs checking to actually make sure that the summary really represents what you wanted it to do. And then finally, AI, anything generated by AI tool seriously needs facts checking. Most of these tools have training data. The training data has facts, but it can hallucinate, so it really needs facts checking. So those are my initial learnings on using ChatGPT and other AI tools. Always take responsibility as an author, always consider the principle of ethics, and always also think, that if you submit a manuscript that's generated by something else, what's the value of getting a recognition from your community, in the form of a graduation or a good peer review, if what you generated, is not really science. So take responsibility for and ownership of your research. And I wish you all the best with writing your theses and papers.